Hi guys, it's Joy, and I wanted to give my perspective on the new Britney Spears documentary. I don't know if it's a documentary, but it is I guess, a episode, not a series, but there was something that came out about Britney Spears that a lot of people were hyped for. I was really hyped for it. Had I not had all the Trisha Paytas stuff happen on my channel, I probably would have covered it this week. But if you haven't seen it, guys, you can check it out. It's going to be on FX. So if you don't have FX, I have Hulu. I think most people my age don't actually, we don't have regular cable. But I have Hulu, so you can find it on Hulu. It's called Framing Britney Spears. Now, before you do that, go check out my other Britney Spears videos. I have two or three. I'll have links in the description. I will link them up here somewhere. But Britney Spears, I love Britney. Now, here's what's interesting. I'm not a super fan of all of Britney's music, but I really I'm a fan of her as the person. And I think, funny enough, I think that's one of the reasons so many people like her, aside from the fact that, she aligned herself with some really brilliant songwriters and producers that put out so much just timeless epic music, right? I think we've all kind of really fallen in love with her, the person. And I used to kind of battle back and forth with whether or not I liked her because, and not a lot of people know this, but so I was a performer growing up, singer, dancer, actor, all of those things. Not as much into dance. But I did musicals, so there was a lot in there. But I mean, my training was really that the focus was always music and, funny enough, broadcast journalism. And this was before YouTube. We had an AV center where we did a little news show, and I actually would put together different stories I would find or different things and submit them into national and international contests and win stuff. It was super fun. And I remember thinking, I'm like, for some reason, I know I'm not going to go into news, but this is important for me. And that was kind of the precursor to me doing YouTube. But I did this between 99 and '03 when YouTube wasn't a thing. So I'm like, oh, that's what started me and piqued my interest. But it taught me a lot. I was like, oh, you can do 80 hours of editing on 2 to 3 minutes of video. But also we had really crude tools back then. So, here's what a lot of people might not know about me. I grew up very much as a singer, and in some ways, not all of them, I was kind of on a similar path to Britney Spears in terms of what she got herself into. So you guys know Britney Spears did the Mickey Mouse Club. I did something called, I forget what the name is, but long story short, we would go work with Disney for 3 weeks out of the summer and put on a full freaking production. And I think we did 6 shows, and we would actually perform on the Cinderella stage, and it was for teenagers. And I got to do that, and there were talent scouts there, the same people that, were talent scouts for Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, all of these big names. When I was growing, those were the huge names when I was growing up. They were there, and it was a very big deal, and Disney would recruit a lot of these people to work with, and they'd have, A&R reps and all these things. And it was a very, very big deal, and I did that for 2 or 3 years. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. And I got I got some callbacks to, and I think I was not a featured soloist, but I was an alto they put a mic in front of on one of the songs. So that was super fun. And it was interesting. We had 18-hour days. 18-hour days. And then we would have 2-3 hours in the parks. People would just nap in between 20-minute rehearsal times. It was intense. It was very intense, but it was kind of this is to show you what it's like if you want to live that life of that kind of performer. I can't remember one of the guys who choreographed Super Bowl shows, was in charge. It was all really big level stuff. I did a lot of really interesting, neat things with music, and Britney Spears was, really, she was the biggest thing on the planet growing up. And so you kind of couldn't get away from her. So it was weird because even though I was kind of a little bit of an elitist music snob, and I still can be in some ways, which I kind of hate about myself, but at the same time, I'm you can't help what you don't like, right? I didn't like what she did with her voice because as a vocal singer and growing up as a vocal coach, I'm what she's doing is harmful to her vocal cords. She's manipulating her vocal cords. And what's so sad is we found out over the years, and the majority of what we know about Britney Spears is manipulation from people, including her changing her voice. And that just killed me hearing that. So just so you guys know, I have a little bit of a parallel with Britney because I feel in some ways I was on that track. As life does, life happened. And I I wasn't able to achieve what I wanted to. And that's okay. I've had to learn that just wasn't for me, right? I never thought I didn't think my legacy would be to be on YouTube talking about things. And hopefully that's not going to be my legacy, but I guess that's part of it and I will take it because there's a reason for everything. And there's a reason that didn't work out for me. I think as well, I don't think I would have ever had the health for it, but I didn't fully understand that back then. We didn't have a full understanding of my health. But anyway, so it's weird. Over the years and learning what's happened to her, I've really studied her. I very much studied her. I wanted to be somebody well-known and that sang, so I studied a lot of those, people, those pop stars at the time. And so I've really followed her story over the years, and it's really heartbreaking. And I know you guys know this. Like, she's basically stuck in a conservatorship with somebody who was like her father, who was literally physically not nice to her. He got her children taken away when she entered the conservatorship simply so she could make sure to have access to her children. She was supposed to only be in this for a couple years. It is now, I think, 12 years going on, might be longer. That literally, I think it's been longer than that. And there's no end in sight. When you get stuck in the mental health facilities, it's almost impossible to get out, like in certain areas of either law or like the state. It can be really, really difficult. This is something I know a little bit about if you guys know my personal journey. So I have some real weird parallels to her, and my heart really goes out to her. And I saw this documentary and I had really high hopes for it, right? Called Framing Britney Spears. Go check it out on Hulu. And honestly, if I'm being honest, and by the way, spoiler alerts, this is going to be some spoiler alerts if you haven't seen it, I was pretty disappointed. Like, I was excited because Felicia Collada was going to speak. And we know Felicia was like an assistant to Britney for years. And then suddenly, I just remember all I heard was she was going to go work for the Jonas Brothers. And it was like, well, why would she leave Britney? And I was like, she's going to have so much information, so much tea, so much dirt, right? And we're going to learn a lot more about what's really happening. And that didn't happen. I was so disappointed. I was so there for Felicia. Felicia basically said the reason she signed up to do the documentary was to remind people that Britney is a great person and a great performer. And she gave some insight. She talked about Britney and how she got involved. And she said what ended up happening to her was when Britney went through that conservatorship, right? When she went through that situation, she was working directly for Britney under, Britney's company or Britney's team. And Britney's father, Jamie, came in and basically removed her. So then Felicia was no longer an assistant to her, but she worked for the same touring company. So she would basically give backstage tours to people when they would go different places. And Felicia basically said, I'll tell you what it looks like to me. It looks like the people coming in didn't understand how integral I was or my role with Britney. And the way she kind of describes it is I was removed without me or Britney having any say in it. But that's as far as it went. Like, I was sitting there, like, waiting for some bombs to drop, waiting for something, and nothing. Most of it, from my perspective, was a lot of recycled stuff that we already know. People who've been following the situation, following the court cases, following what's been going on with Britney Spears. And yeah, it was disappointing. I think a lot of us have a really big vested interest in seeing Britney kind of be able to come into her own and have her own life and her own freedom after how hard she's worked and how much insane crap you see when you start digging into this stuff in the court cases and how much insanity is going on behind why she's not capable of controlling her life, but her physically scary, who does scary things to people, alcoholic father is supposed to be in charge of anything, the one who got her kids taken away. Now, my understanding is he actually stepped down from the conservatorship role over the last few months. And thank God. I mean, if he got her kids taken away, shouldn't he? So but there's still a lot of legal battles to where it's hard for Britney to even have a lawyer that she wants or a lawyer that she can be comfortable with. And there's also a lot of speculation on whether or not her social media is run by her or other people. And they do bring up some interesting points, which I do want to go over. But again, a lot of it's just stuff we know. So I have my notes. I'm going to go over the things that I thought were interesting. So they did cover, which I'm happy more people are covering this, the hypocrisy of her sexuality when she was younger. One thing that drives me nuts now that as a society we were brainwashed and didn't understand then is that, guess what? Women get to have their own sexuality too. I think the problem, and I can understand why people would have a problem with it, the problem was she was a teenager, and to a lot of people, this was kind of espousing sexuality to teenagers. And Britney's thing was like, well, to act like we're not, sexual people as teenagers is stupid. And funny enough, I think everybody's right. I think Britney's right, and that's something that, we need to embrace as a culture and for women, and realize that teenagers go through that too. But I also understand the parents who were concerned because the big media keeps wanting to sexualize their children at younger and younger ages. So I don't know. I'm really torn because, again, I can really see both sides of that coin and that spectrum. But the problem is that Britney Spears herself, she was solely blamed. Because I think the people who were concerned, I think there were two things. Growing up then, it was a very conservative time. Not conservative like we know now. Conservative like all the LGBT are evil. Like crazy stuff like that. Stuff now that just common knowledge seems kind of nuts. And they were really big on, no sexuality at all before marriage. So you have that aspect of the conservatives back then, which again, it seems like it's vastly changed. There's still some people, right? And a lot of religious people who were really upset. But then there were a faction of people, and I think this was the smaller faction that's now become the larger faction due to people on YouTube who speak up about these things, and, which I'm happy about, and I've been able to raise my voice about, where it's more about people are tired of Hollywood sexualizing their children and pushing children's boundaries, further and further on what's appropriate for sexualization of children. And everyone back then really just ripped into Britney and blamed Britney for it, when I don't think any of this... She was a child. None of this was her fault. And on top of that, she got asked the most insane things. People were constantly, every interview was about her virginity. And many times they bring up her body parts, and especially her boobs, as like a 16-year-old. I mean, it's disgusting what she had to go through. And I'm glad that they brought up all of that hypocrisy. And then they brought up the hypocrisy of her breakup with Justin Timberlake, and somebody had said this, and this is very interesting, and I thought it was a good point. I forget who it was in the documentary, but they said, we don't have royals over here. We have celebrity couples. And when Britney and Justin came on the scene, that was like the biggest celebrity couple we'd had in a really long time. And the royals guys are basically people who are picked apart by the media. That's really what it is. They go to charity functions. They represent this old way of being in England when they don't really even have that much power anymore, is my understanding. Top of that, they're in kind of all types of scandals. Hey, Andrew, hey, we see you. And, they're not the greatest of people many times, but it's like the media's job is to just pick them apart and be vultures and harass them as much as possible. So anyway, they compared it to that, and when the breakup happened, kind of like how the UK just demonized Meghan Markle, like just insanely. Not saying she's perfect, just it was crazy to watch them go after her in that way, and they went after Diana. They went after all kinds of people. But in the United States, with Britney and Justin, when they broke up, there was this narrative, it must be Britney's fault. So there's this, guys, when I was growing up, I want you to understand what women like me have fought for social change and speaking and raising our voices. There was this narrative that when things would go wrong, it's the woman's fault. Somebody did the R word to her. Well, what was she wearing? How did she instigate it? Did she lead him on? As it was like, as a woman, we had the ultimate responsibilities of everything, while men got to leave us with children and go do whatever they wanted and have very little accountability unless we force the state to get in. And yet everything is on our shoulders, and we're constantly just horrible people who are failing. And now that still goes on today, but it was even worse then. So when they broke up, because Britney, from the media's perspective, they had painted her as this person who acts like she's innocent, but she's really a harlot. Well, it must be because she's a harlot. And you know what? Even if that were the case, they're both young and they were both exploring. That happens. It sucks. I'm not saying it should, but it happens. And again, I'm not even saying that did happen. Like, at the end of the day, we don't know. But Justin's kind of alluded to the fact that she cheated on him. So, and again, who knows? We just don't know the situation. So, it was really interesting because one thing they did have, there were a couple interesting things. They had one of the guys from the Paparazzi who was there the night she went after that guy's vehicle. It was his vehicle. They had that paparazzi guy on, and he was kind of weird because on the one hand, he did seem a little sympathetic, but on the other hand, he justified it. So this is what he was saying. He said, when it came to the paparazzi and Britney Spears, it was like all of them were nice to each other in the beginning. Like, she needed us for good PR and we needed her. So everything was cordial. And the paparazzi said it was when she had her children, things were going crazy. He said that he actually wanted to be a motion picture film director. That was his, what he had his heart set on. But he's like, it's really hard once you fall down that hole of paparazziism because the money is so good. It's almost impossible to say no to. I can kind of relate to that only in how YouTube works. I mean, the money isn't super good, but it's enough for me to stay alive, and you're constantly walking that battle of, am I doing the right thing? Am I being exploitative? How much can you exploit something? Like, where's my personal boundaries and ethics lie? Having to push those or step back. But I can kind of understand. I know it's not the same, but it's like I wake up and I'm like, many days, I'm like, I'm a YouTuber who talks about gossip. Out of all the things I can do, this is where my life has ended. But sometimes that just happens. So my whole point is to just say I can kind of be compassionate, even though I don't like what the media did and what the paparazzi did is disgusting. I can also be compassionate in terms of how you can kind of fall down that hole and not even realize it. So he was saying that everything just kind of got to a frenzied point and got negative for her once she had kids, that everything just exploded. And he said the narrative became that Britney was an unfit mother. And they went over this, which I thought was great. There'd be situations where the paparazzi would put her in a situation where they surrounded her with her children. And she, like, one time she almost fell when she had her kids. She didn't. But then it was across all the newsstands and on the news stations for a week. It was people weighing in and experts saying how Britney's a bad mother. Nobody went to her defense to say, hey, maybe the paparazzi were nonstop in her way, and maybe what they're doing is predatory, and maybe it's harassment, and maybe they're putting her and her child in danger. Like, nobody thought that way. Nobody went to bat for Britney because we still had a society that blamed women for everything. We still get blamed for all kinds of stupid stuff. It still happens, and don't believe us, and don't listen to us, and don't take us seriously. Hey, medical system, hey. So then he said everyone was weighing in on her and her behavior, and then Lynn had said that, and I did a video on this, that in her book, now her mother, Britney's mother, had said that she thinks that Britney was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I definitely think that was part of Britney Spears' mental health issues, and nobody was compassionate. Nobody got her help. I want you to know, guys, PMDD wasn't that widely known back then. In fact, what we knew of it was Tom Cruise, because I guess Brooke Shields come out and she had said I had, that I had issues with depression after having a child, which is very, very common. And he went and he did this famous interview with Matt Lauer where when Matt was talking to him about this, he kept saying, you're so glib. I understand psychology. I understand medicine. Do you? No. And it was he's real intense about it, and it was really, really weird. I don't know, I'm torn, because on the one hand, I can understand and agree with the concept. Let's try not to put dangerous medication in our body if we don't have to. And on the other hand, if you need a medication to live and function and nothing else is working, more power to you. That's what they're there for, right? I do think in this society we tend to over-medicate, but if you need it, right? Like, I'm not here to say what anybody does or doesn't need for their health. Everybody's health is different and unique and should be treated with respect and with the uniqueness that it comes with that. So, and then there were videos of Britney, and I thought this was so heartbreaking. They showed videos of Britney saying she was scared of the paparazzis. They would surround her. But the paparazzi person, he was saying, he said, basically he was the guy that got his car hurt. That he explained what happened that night. We've heard this before, that she was mad because she wanted to see her kids. She went over to Kevin's house. Kevin wouldn't let her in, so she left. They went to like a gas station, I think, or behind a Jiffy Lube. And I guess already before they had been at a gas station, and he had stopped along with one other photographer. They had stopped there and tried to ask her questions, and she wasn't having it. She was not answering anything. And then at that point, the photographer, then again, when they were at the Jiffy Lube, right, after the situation with Kevin, Britney was upset. And he got out and was trying to ask things of Britney. And Britney, I think it's her cousin Allie, was saying, please leave her alone. Please back off. And Britney lost it, took an umbrella and messed up his car. And you know what? I'm sitting here going, if that's the worst Britney did after everything she went through and the harassment with them, I think she's a saint. I think she's a saint. Can you imagine, guys, a world where the whole world cheered for her destruction and they thought she was awful and sympathized with the paparazzi? They sympathized with the photographers. When I tell you guys the 2000s and even 2010s were a different world, I am not exaggerating. Y'all can't, like, the type of trauma that we went through collectively as a generation, especially women, is nuts. Like, it's so hard to, I was still figuring things out. I was in my teens, early 20s, and I was still figuring out the world. It probably wasn't until my later 20s that I started to really understand the inequities done to women. Maybe even my 30s. It took me a while to really see it and open up to it. I think I had to have my health decline for me to really go, oh, yeah, this is awful, and really kind of open up and see. I also think the Me Too movement helped me. Before then, I seemed to have this, I kind of brushed away any, negative sexual harassment or experiences I had. I think somewhere in the back of my head, maybe I, the new age stuff. I attracted them into my life or deserve them. I now think a lot of that's horse crap at this point. Well, not completely, but that's also a way you can really you can legitimize predators' behavior, and you can shame victims, which I'm not cool with. It's always good to know what could you do differently or what can you do better. How can you take responsibility in a situation? But when you are super victimized, I don't think that's the time to put the ultimate guilt on that person. Do you know what I mean? So let's continue. He goes up to the car and says, "Hey, Britney, I'm going to ask you a couple questions and I'll leave you alone." And then Allie had come up to him and said, "Please leave her alone." He struck the car. He says she never gave a clue she wanted to be left alone. He says, because they were asking her, "Why don't you just leave her alone?" And he says, well, from his perspective, she needed them, they needed her. It was a symbiotic relationship. He knew it was getting worse and worse, but she never actually asked for them to leave her alone. She would ask sometimes, "Leave me alone for the day," is what he said, but never as a forever situation. So it's interesting. The beginning of the documentary, he's like, I don't think back then I could look and see what the harm we were doing to her. But then it also seems like he went into justification mode too. Or maybe that's just really what it is like he didn't see, they just didn't understand it. But I also think they probably weren't looking for her and her humanity. They probably weren't focused on her as a person and a human, because that's not their job, right? I mean, their job is to treat her like an object. It's just complete objectification. So his thing was he didn't know how bad it fully was for her because she didn't communicate that. He says Britney said she didn't want her father. Oh, and then so there was another part in this too about Britney had, there was a lawyer in the very beginning of the conservatorship that came forward that said, Britney has said from the beginning she didn't want her father in control of this conservatorship. And then there were a few other little interesting things. So for instance, this is one I didn't know, I thought was really interesting. So the conservatorship, they said, is supposed to be a hybrid business model for her. And there's never, as far as I could see, and as far as what even the documentary said, I've never seen a hybrid business model that was made out of a conservatorship. Like, that's absolutely crazy. And then there's a lot of speculation. I'm glad they didn't go into speculation about her social media, because there have been a lot of people who've made videos and conspiracy theories all about her social media accounts, which honestly, more power to them. There's a lot of weirdness, and that we found out Britney isn't in control of them. She has people that control them. A lot of times they repost the exact same stuff. A lot of it looks forced, and people think Britney doesn't have a voice, and they, the conclusion is that somebody else is running the account, but she's giving hidden messages through this. So I don't know. On the one hand, if her father controls everything, he can basically allow her not to have a voice. So I hate to say it, but maybe she is. And here's the other thing. We know she has. She's talked about giving hidden messages through the media about different things. This is stuff she's talked about in her past when she's been suffering. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And I don't necessarily, I think in this one, I think it's cause for concern for people to speculate as hard and to really look for things, because Britney has confirmed that's what she's done before. Yeah, again, a lot of this was stuff that we knew. I did like that they, I was excited for Felicia, but it was a big nothing burger. Nothing happened as a result of that. The photographer, the paparazzi photographer, I thought that's a really good get. It's a really good find to have that person on there. And it was interesting to hear their perspective. Otherwise, I think it was just something to educate the masses who don't follow the story on what it is, which that's good in itself, right? And if that's the case, I'm happy. But I thought it was a letdown. If you want to go support it, if you want to go watch it, you are more than welcome to. Britney Spears is a subject I would like to cover more on this channel as time goes on. So let me know in the comments if you would like to see it. Also, guys, if you like the video, give me a thumbs up, like the video. And if you like this kind of content, subscribe and hit notifications. And yeah, I'm really curious. Let me know in the comment section what you think, or if there's information I'm missing. I just feel like it was all stuff I'd heard before. But the good news is it's getting out to the mainstream, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you all so much for the love and support as always. I'm giving y'all lots of hugs, lots of kisses, and stay safe and stay blessed and stay healthy, and I will see y'all soon. Okay, bye, guys.